Hello and very welcome to my first real reading challenge update. If you have been following this channel, then you will have seen me set up and go through my own little spring reading challenge. And it really was such a lot of fun. I did manage to complete all prompts just in time, which I'm quite proud of, and now I want to share all the books that I read with you. And also, I want to show you and tell you the little storyline that I came up with based on my choices. So yeah, let's get into it. So this is my lovely reading challenge spread that I have created to track all my reads, and that has all the different flowers and prompts on it so that I was able to fill them out nicely. Just to make sure that you understand how my challenge worked in case you weren't around for it, basically I want to collect all types of flowers on this page, and each of the flowers has their own prompt. So, for example, the Calendula wants to have a book with flowers or plants on the cover. And in the same vein, all of these other flowers work as well. I created this whole spread in a video, and I was also talking about how it works. So if you want to find out more about that, I will link that in the cards for you. But in general, as you can see, I have grown all the different plants, and that happened because I was able to make sure that they get enough sun and enough water, which are also two prompts that I had to fulfill for that. And I actually started with those two. But this was not all that I did for the challenge, and if you've seen my challenge announcement, then you already know the setting that I was based in. But in case you don't, let's now slip into the role of a young herbologist in the region of Thistlewood together. This young herbologist gets a letter in the post one day, and it is still early spring at this point, and the letter reads as follows. Dearest member, the esteemed society must call for your assistance in procuring herbs for our fair region in Thistlewood. The stores have run distressingly low, and many potion masters have requested our assistance in ensuring the supply for their craft. Thus, if you find yourself able, please focus your attention on growing the herbs and flowers listed below for the coming season, as the society depends on your gracious help. This letter was sent by the Herbologist Society, and our young lady is of course part of the society, and as you can expect, she sets out to do all of this. And I wrote this whole storyline in the background here for this setup, because I like to not only have a challenge where I can tick off boxes, but to have a challenge where I can actually have a little storyline and have some fun with it. So let's go through my storyline, and for each part of it we will also have a look at the book that I read for it, and maybe you can tell how I got the idea for the storyline based on the book. So let's see. When I got the letter, I started planning right away. As soon as my planting pots were ready, I went out to get everything I needed. First, I made my way down to the river, where I rested on the bank for a moment and watched the water lilies open up their red blossoms in the last bits of sunlight on the horizon. I had a short vision of a beautiful woman with long black hair waving at me from the river's depth before I regained my senses and refilled my watering can, finally heading home again. The first book that I picked for the challenge was to fit to the prompt of water, and for that I needed water in the title or on the cover of the book, and in this case it actually has both. So let me just pull this up here so that you can see the cover a little bit better, even though it is quite dark. And basically the Water Lilies of Mishipeshu is kind of a historical fiction with a little bit of a fantastical element, and I really enjoyed reading it. So it plays in an area of Indiana, and it starts out when there's still all the Indians around and the settlers have just moved there. So it was quite interesting to learn a bit more about the history of the region And also it was written in kind of interconnected stories. So we would jump ahead through time and always jump for at least a few years to come to the next person that had to do something with an old manuscript that describes the water lilies with special powers. So it was a quite nice and naturally focused book, and I really liked the writing style. And if you want to check out the more in-depth discussion on this book, then you can go ahead and have a look at my March reading wrap-up, because that's when I read this one. On the next morning, I set out to arrange my planting pots in a nice little island of sunlight to give them the best place to grow. There was one place that was exactly right to catch the sun's path across the sky for most of the day, and soon everything was ready. To find something to fit the sun prompt, it wasn't actually that easy, but I did have Ariadne on my TBR, and it does have this nice stylized sun on the cover, so I figured that would fit fair enough. And again, this is also more of a historical fiction, and basically it's a retelling of Greek myths about the two daughters of King Minos of Crete, which is also the area of the Minotaur, and basically we follow a female perspective through those old times, which I really enjoyed as well. This meant that I could set out to collect some seeds, and I decided to start with a difficult plant. For the Valerian, I would need to travel far. Thus I set off on my journey, and on the next day started to feel a faint pulse tugging at my senses and drawing me in. This had to be it. I followed the sense, and it led me to a field of beautiful flowers and a whole group of Valerian in full bloom. For the first seeds that I collected, I read The Strength of the Few, which is the second book in the Hierarchy series by James Islington. And this one fit really well for the prompt of having a lot of pages, because it has 760 pages. And since I really enjoyed the first book, The Will of the Many, I had to pick up the second book as well. I really enjoyed this as a second book in the series, but I will say that I can't talk about what's going on in this book, because otherwise I would be spoiling the first part. So if you enjoyed The Will of the Many, then you definitely have to continue on with this one. And I'm quite sad that I have to wait for the third one to come out. But that's fair. I'd rather have the author take time and write a good book than stress out too much. Having picked up those seeds, I considered my path back. There was a pasture not far from here, which generally had some flowers around as well. Soon I saw the sheep graze on a little hill and decided to watch them for a while. That was a great idea, as one of them led me to a patch of chamomile, where I could pick up more seeds before then, finally, heading back home. And maybe you could already tell by me talking about sheep in my storyline, but the next book that I picked up for the challenge is Glennkill. And this one, as you can also see on the cover with all the little sheep down there, is a sheep mystery where a group of sheep solves a murder. This was actually written in German, but it also has been translated to English, and if you want to read a funny little story about some crazy sheep exploring a mystery, then I can absolutely recommend it. In English it is called 3 Bags Full. Once I had those seeds planted and watered, I went on a short social visit to a small cottage on the hillside. The lovely family there welcomed me warmly, and I went for a walk with the two sisters, on which we came across a few plantains that I could harvest quickly. Next up, for a prompt of having a book with a nice border on the cover, I picked up Sense and Sensibility, which I have been wanting to read for quite a while. And I have to say that I really enjoyed reading it because it was just such a nice romance. And of course, it's a classic by Jane Austen, so you know what kind of book it is simply by that. Anyway, it does have two sisters living in a rural area, and that felt like a great point to take to also use for my storytelling in my reading challenge. Glennkill and Sense and Sensibility are already part of my April reading, so if you want to look more in depth into these books, then check out my April reading wrap-up. Since I was already out, I decided to go look for more flowers right away. Determined, I began walking uphill to climb the high peak of Dragon's Rest, from which I would have an amazing view across the countryside. When I reached the last wooded area of the mountain, I had to wade through a cluster of stinging nettles. Not exactly nice, but at least I grabbed a few seeds for my trouble. And with the next book, which is Black Powder War and part 3 of the Temeraire series by Naomi Novik, we're moving on into my May reading, which is not out yet, so if you want more detail on these books, then you have to come back again quite soon at the end of the month. Anyway, this is a great storyline in an alternate history setting, and basically it asks the question, what would have happened with the Napoleonic Wars if they were dragons? So that is one of my favorite series at the moment, and I can only recommend picking it up if you're interested in reading about dragons and a historical European setting. Moving on quickly, I continued up the tall mountain and soon enough reached the peak. Bright blooms were shining up all around me, but the patch of color in front of a dark cave drew me in. Gerberas in assorted colors, just what I still needed. Next up we have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, which has a very bright and beautiful popping cover, which worked out well for my Gerbera prompt, but at the same time it was quite cruel and horrific, because it plays in a kind of historical fantasy that is set in a setting similar to China and references a lot of wars and issues around the poppy trade. And as expected from this author, it was quite political, but it was also a lot more cruel than I would have thought, and that made it quite a difficult read. So only pick this one up if you don't mind gore and war crimes and really, really dark themes. They took me quite a while to harvest though, so by the time I moved on, it was already getting darker. A bit worried, I headed down as quickly as I dared, but before long it was dark all around me. Luckily my eyes had adjusted and I still found the path. Close to home, a faint glow lighted up a bunch of calendula flowers. So I grabbed the final seeds on my way right there. And as you can tell from the little storyline where it just went dark, this last book is focused on night. So it is called Night Magic by Lee and Hinian. And basically it is a non-fiction book about nature at night. It was quite interesting to listen to, and I really enjoyed learning about the animals in it, but it also was still quite focused on a specific part of America and also quite focused on the people working with the animals. So it wasn't quite what I was hoping for, but still quite a good read. And with these last seeds, I had actually made it. I planted all of the remaining seeds the next day, and I cared for them over a few weeks until they all grew to lovely flowers and herbs. They still do need a bit more time, but it won't be long until I can start mixing potions for the society. So yeah, that was my little storyline for my herbologist. But let's get back into the real world. Yes, you heard that correctly. I will continue this challenge soon. Since I don't want to stress myself out, I have decided to take June as my month off, but the summer challenge part will start in July and again run for 3 months. I can show you a little sneak peek already. As said, it will be focusing on creating potions, and I will need to read a book for each potion recipe. So make sure you're subscribed so you won't miss the challenge setup sometime next month. And you're again very welcome to join me for the challenge, of course. Depending on how much you read in a month, you could also still go and collect your own flowers for it. I have the announcement video linked over here for you, and there you can get all the materials to print out as well. But for now, thank you for watching and have a great rest of your day.